me back to the place I know, with the mystery shack and the forest gnomes. I'm already packed, so come on, let's go. Don't get me started, my heart's in Gravity Falls. Welcome to Mystery Shack Look Back, a nostalgic time capsule and no-spoiler book club of the original Gravity Falls fandom. We are your curators. I'm Ella.
I'm Charlie. Ella, when did Submarine come out?
Oh yeah, that would be October 5th, 2012. We talked about it last week.
Okay, so then clearly this week we're talking about whatever episode came out October 12th.
Yeah, the following week, October 12th, 2012.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, you think that.
Oh, okay, so much like between Dipper versus Manliness and Double Dipper, and between Time Traveler's Pig and Fight Fighters, and between Fight Fighters and Little Dipper, there was a week in between where they didn't air a new episode. So this is just one of those 2-week gaps instead of the standard 1 week, right?
Yeah, well, right. That's obviously not what this is either. There was no episode on October 19th, 2012, if that's what you're asking. No.
Is this the first 3-week gap between episodes?
Yes and no. Mostly no, because there was also no episode the week after that. Or the week after that, or the week after that, or the week after that.
Wait, but what about the week after that?
No.
Ella, what is going on? What is happening?
You know, I'm not fully sure. I'm a little concerned. I think we should bring in an expert.
An expert on a show not airing? Okay, good luck finding one.
Well, what about right here?
Oh my gosh, is that Abby Kirby, Fandom Scholar?
That is Abby Kirby, Fandom Scholar. Why don't you come on up here, Abby? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Abby Kirby, the Fandom Scholar.
Now, what does that mean?
There is an area of interdisciplinary study called fan or fandom studies that sort of analyzes the role of how we interact with media and how media also interacts with us.
So as the first smart person on this podcast, specifically, you do a lot of incorporation of Gravity Falls in your studying and in the classroom, right?
Yeah, so hello world. I am a fan fiction teacher, and it is exactly as weird as it sounds. I teach a fan fiction class to gifted and talented middle schoolers. And Gravity Falls has always played a unique role in our class, not just because I think the show is fantastic and that the kids I teach are the perfect age to be watching it for the first time, but because Gravity Falls is a really wonderful case of a fandom and the work that goes into it, not just from this fan fiction element, which seems like it could be an entirely different episode of this podcast, so I won't go into it, but the way that fans interacted with the show and its sort of more interactive elements that came alongside it, things like secret codes and things that developed over these periods of break time. Hiatus.
Yeah, we've already been kind of analyzing this on a more micro level with our Hall of Conspiracies, with going over how it has shifted from maybe this is probably an animation error, I don't know if that's really anything, and then realizing that stuff matters so heavily in this show that every frame is getting broken down.
So in episode 1 of our show, Ella on the spot came up with the phrase that to describe a hiatus that,
like a cup of yogurt, left out. The culture just developed over time.
That is, yeah, entirely true. That hiatus is kind of this time. Gwynne describes it as being fan-made time, which is when fans sort of enter this transformative process where nothing is actually happening for a short period of time within a show, or at least what we watch on the screen. And it's sort of up to fans at times to generate these cultures, and they use it as a time of great creation and exploration and communication with each other. This is the time when a fandom, I personally think, truly becomes a fandom, because now they have nothing left but each other.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, literally, because for all intents and purposes, Dipper and Mabel are frozen in time.
I wonder if any of our listeners heard us say that we brought on a fandom scholar and thought we were joking, and is now starting to gauge, I'm not so clear on if this is a joke or not. No, we really did bring in an expert for this.
And I'm genuinely, so excited, because it's such a cool, I love just fields that at a glance are not necessarily like taken as seriously as they should be. But like there is so much like fascinating, like I don't even know what you would call it, like a from an anthropological standpoint, I guess, is like the studying like how this mini microcosm of a culture like develops within another larger culture.
It is exactly just like that, interdisciplinary. It involves a lot of communications. It involves English, sociology, anthropology, history. All of these things enter in to fan studies, and this is just going to be my PSA out there to the world. Anyone can be a part of fan studies. You don't have to go and get a fancy degree. You just have to be willing to look into something and do interviews and read as much as you possibly can, and there is a space for you within the field.
Ella and I, at the beginning of every episode, refer to ourselves as these podcast's curators. To us, that's a little bit of a joke. You are an avid listener of the show. It sounds like you're like, yeah, they are curators.
Oh, absolutely. There is definitely, like, you guys are doing something really important here, and that is the preservation of paratextual and cultural memory, which is, as we've been saying, fans do develop their own cultures. Not only do we have to work to preserve the memory of Gravity Falls in places like wikis and try to maintain pieces of like Alex's tweets and all of the secret codes so that future fans can come along and dissect these things with the same opportunities that we had. But we also, in a way, sort of preserve our own memories with each other and things that we were thinking at the time. And that is incredibly vital to who we are as a group of people, as a fandom.
Oh yeah, I have like countless friends I've made because of this show, Charlie included.
Yeah, so like the work that is just being done on this podcast alone is incredibly important, and I cannot stress that enough.
Thank you so much. That's the best thing anyone's ever said about this show, other than the time our friend Liz said it was like when the teacher puts on Bill Nye the Science Guy and everyone in the class gets lit.
Yeah, that is now the second highest compliment. Sorry, Liz.
One of the things I've been thinking about is when Disney Plus announced that rather than the Netflix model of dropping a whole season at once, WandaVision was going to be on a weekly release schedule. People like actually loved that because that meant that the WandaVision fandom got to exist for like a month or two. It got to be part of the culture, and people had time to finish cosplays.
Oh my gosh. Yes, Matt Hills says in an article called Always on Fandom, Waiting and Binging that fans are like constantly filling time together. And they are cooperating and sustaining their like security, that by having these periods of waiting, fans feel this need to preserve everything and to reach out to other people because they don't want to feel like, even in the briefest moments of a break between episodes, like the fandom will disappear. So they like work extra hard during those moments to create and be at the forefront of what is happening. There's almost like a FOMO with it.
Yes, and I think preservation is exactly it, especially like you were saying about this podcast, because so much of this is like we have like screenshots of tweets that don't exist anymore, and like when in the digital age, when things are kind of simultaneously more permanent but also more ephemeral than they've ever been.
Yeah, I have never spent as much time on the Wayback Machine on archive.org as I did with this podcast.
Exactly. And this hiatus, you know, like Charlie was saying, this is the first time it was longer than 2 weeks, and nobody knew when it was going to end, and we can see the fandom transition from just processing that kind of like grief in a way to filling that time and that space, because Disney Channel, at least at the time, would announce, I guess, via press releases and things like that. You would basically, and TV guides, you would know the new episode lineups on pretty much a monthly basis.
You would get the airing schedule for that month at the beginning of the month.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, there's a new episode of Dog with a Blog. That's what they are.
TV Guide started as a magazine that released a monthly airing schedule, and it still existed in 2012. I'm not sure if it still exists, but there also became many, many other ways to check up on that schedule.
Mm-hmm. And it basically resulted in every month, like, I guess October, people probably justified it as like, okay, well, they just aired Summerween. They probably want to keep October Halloween themed. It's fine. We're going to get one in November. And then, like, November came and there were no new episodes, so we're like, it became this roulette of like, maybe this month, and no, maybe this month, and it's like, there's this descent into madness that we can track. October 2nd, 2012, the Gravity Falls wiki tweeted at Alex Hirsch, this was right around the airing time of Summerween, tweeted at Alex Hirsch, can you tell us the name of the episode after Summerween?
Yeah, because previously, the wiki was able to update episodes because they would have a month's TV guide, which means they would have, like, 3 to 5 episodes.
So I guess that was, like, the first signal that something was wrong, is like, I don't know what the name of the next episode is. I have to ask Alex Hirsch.
Yeah, I cannot update this wiki, despite being a wiki admin.
And Alex Hirsch responds, pretty sure the next one is Boss Mabel. And those 2 words are basically all the fandom had to cling to, was like, Boss Mabel. Okay, we know what we're looking for.
The words Boss Mabel echoed in their heads for what wound up being 4 months. Now, 4 months, if I were to just say to you, Summerween came out October, Boss Mabel came out February, that doesn't mean as much as the first thing Ella and I did when we were preparing for this podcast is looked up every release date of and every Gravity Falls media and made a Google Calendar so we could get a visual representation.
Yeah, rather than just hearing the words November to February, seeing a bunch of
blank calendar pages.
Yeah. And I, via the blog gravityfallsconspiracies.tumblr.com, I was able to track this part of this descent into madness because December 27th, 2012, the admin of the blog posted, Disney Channel, why have you forsaken us? Gravity Falls Decoded posted, I guess, at the announcement of the January lineup, which Disney Channel referred to as January, and out of rage, they're like, this is a terrible attempt at a creative name for their January programming. No promos of Boss Mabel were shown yet, so it's likely that Boss Mabel won't air the first Friday of 2013. I looked on the Disney Channel website for scheduling, but there's nothing past January 1st. Stay tuned. And If You Had Wings reblogged with a gif of Gideon storming out of the house angrily. And I remember that image of, like, at the time I felt that way too. It's like, this is, and it like comes to a head, and Yarn Heretics blog submits the question, do you think Disney Channel hates Gravity Falls? I read this on the internet once, and it makes sense considering the hiatuses and how they don't show it very often, and like Gravity Falls Conspiracies kind of elaborates, probably not. It's a high-rated show, and animated shows cost a lot of money, and it makes sense why ultimately it would be on hiatus until February, but I love that you can observe that this contentious relationship is starting between the fans and the network, and it wasn't just the waiting for an episode, but it was the not knowing when the waiting would end, because I think, like, you know, there's something about, maybe it's kind of like the end of a Marvel movie, you know, where they're like, so-and-so will return. Like, just knowing that there is something in the future is like, okay, we're going to find out the release date later. That's okay.
The funniest part of this is Alex wanted to create a animated television show because he was a fan of The Simpsons. Never even thought of children's television as an option. It never even crossed his mind that he'd be working in children's television. Never watched the Disney Channel really. And so, like, as the fandom was starting to hate Disney, he couldn't, like, tell them, oh no, don't blame Disney, because he's like, no, that's fair.
It is accurate. And it got to the point, like, it was like this crisis of faith of, like, will our God ever come back to us? Like, people were not even sure if the show was going to come back. I had a friend at school who I talked about Gravity Falls with, that first batch of 12 episodes as they were airing, and after a while, like, I was still into Gravity Falls because, you know, I was in with the fandom and all that, and I brought it up one day, like, during that hiatus, and my friend was like, oh yeah, like, did that show end? Like, is that show still on? I was like, don't say that. It's still on. It's gonna come back. You'll see.
One of the things I had to think about when I was creating this podcast with Ella is who is our target demographic. And I realized who it is. It is friends of people who are obsessed with Gravity Falls. Because if you on your own decision, just like, oh, I gotta check this Gravity Falls thing out, then you watch Summerween, Disney Plus says, you want to play the next episode? And you click, yeah, sure. But if you had a friend who was there since the beginning, they would be like, that's not how we did it. That wasn't what it was like in my day.
One does not simply watch Boss Mabel after watching Summerween.
So I genuinely think this would be a great podcast for people obsessed with Gravity Falls to force their friends to listen to. And Ella and I have made a lot of YouTube videos about Gravity Falls, and every time they got a little weird, we'd always get a comment like, this is what the hiatus is doing to the fandom. And I always had to reply, no, Ella and I are just like this.
Yeah, every time there was like a weird post on the subreddit, it was like, hiatus intensifies, or like, I don't know.
You've merely adopted the hiatus brain.
Yes.
We were born in it. Molded by it.
All the fans were turning to Alex, and I think for him this might have been like a really weird thing, because this was before Disney in particular expected its creators to also take on the duo role of like spokesperson and promoter on Twitter, which is now like becoming like hotly debated in the animation community.
Yeah, the fact that crew members are now drawing promo pictures for no extra money, and like,
yeah, is this their job? And the answer is no, not really. Yes, they have every right to talk about it and promote it.
Yeah, Disney has a whole marketing team, like, for a reason. They should.
Yeah, and now they're like, especially with the animated shows, doing this. And while I think Alex handled it like a champ most of the time, like trying to simultaneously appease his fandom that he probably didn't expect to have to such a high degree.
So the first creator of an animated show to act in this position was actually the supervising producer of Gravity Falls, Rob Renzetti. My Life as a Teenage Robot, the show he created, is largely largely recognized as the first animated show with a crew-run blog. But you see that, like, they don't really understand the etiquette of how you're supposed to interact with fans. Like, this is going to get a little blue for this podcast, but the only other popular My Life as a Teenage Robot blog at the time was one dedicated to sharing pornographic fan art. And it had to become a question within the official blog of, do we promote the only other blog dedicated to our show or not? And they went with yes, which I think now is recognized as the wrong decision, but they didn't have a compass.
This was widely hated and was universally recognized as a bad move. Yeah, and I remember Alex kind of talking about how at the start of the show, he was like, I know how exciting it was to hear back from somebody I sent a fan letter to, so I'm going to reply to every fan letter I get. And then that became impossible.
No, there were straight up people who just like were pondering if the show was over because they had nothing to go on. Like, famously, Angry Beavers wrote a season finale and Nickelodeon was like, no, we're going to keep rerunning this show. If kids think there are no more episodes, they'll have no reason to watch the reruns. Please don't produce this episode. And then as an April Fool's prank, actually sent them... They actually got the voice actors to record the script and sent it to Nickelodeon for April Fools just to piss them off. So yeah, it was a standard in children's animation to just not know when a show was over and to just no longer see new episodes on the TV Guide. That was how we knew a show was over. So there were a lot of people who were just like, maybe that was it? I don't know. And another person tweeted at Alex Hirsch, at Weird Movie Fan, it is coming back though, right? And Alex responded, absolutely. We wouldn't stop now. You guys don't even know the Triangle Guy's name yet. And this was shared to the blog Gideon Pines with the caption, it has a name! And that's a great transition to our next topic today. There is a company in Peru known as Bamtang Games. They're best known for making Nickelodeon kart racers, but they make a lot of Nickelodeon website game, Nick.com games and Disney Channel games. Don't play any of them without your parents' permission, but...
we'll know if you do.
We'll know. We'll find you. And then the teacher we have with us will slap you with a ruler.
Virtually, I guess.
But in January 11th, 2013, Bamtang released a beat-em-up based on the episode Fight Fighters called Rumble's Revenge.
Is it about Rumble and his revenge?
Yeah. Much like previously Rumble had become real to fight them in real life, this time they're going into the video game to fight him in his realm.
Ah, all right. How can I play this fantastic sounding game?
For the most part, you can't.
Oh.
Because it was programmed with something at the time known as Adobe Flash, formerly known as Macromedia Flash, now known as nothing, because it was discontinued in December 2020. But there is something called the Flashpoint Project, and if you Google that, you should be able to find software that has archived a lot of currently unplayable Flash games. There are 2 reasons that Rumble's Revenge is remembered better than the other Gravity Falls browser games. 1, it's really good game.
It's a good game.
And we're going to get more into that, so you're going to have to wait or fast forward to hear number 2. This game features the reveal of the Triangle Guy's name.
So, Abby, I know you had something about just the concept of an external piece of media that is not the text itself.
Yeah, these are called paratexts, and they are materials that surround a published main text supplied by the authors, editors, printers, and publishers. Like, I have directly lifted that from Wikipedia. We often think of paratexts as like books or video games, director's commentaries, but they can take a lot of different forms. That also includes things like Twitter and Comic-Con panels, too. A paratext is not necessarily like a mandatory part of the media. Fans can still watch Gravity Falls and have no idea what Rumble's Revenge is and still get the entire story. But what paratexts do is they invite this increased attention to an aspect of the plot or characters, and they give us more opportunities to deepen or change our interpretations of a show or film. There's like even such a thing as a fan-made paratext, which is what your podcast is and looks at. Those things like Tumblr posts and fan fiction and fan art and things that happen in forums and on wikis, those are all ways that we are sort of paratextually supplementing Gravity Falls. And Gravity Falls is just the perfect representation of what it means to have an interactive and paratextual piece of media.
I just played the game for the first time last night, thanks to the Flashpoint Project.
Yes.
Ella has played it before.
I probably played it when it came out, because, again, when you're, like Abby and Charlie were saying, when you are that desperate for breadcrumbs, you're either creating things on your own, which I was, or you're just following every possible outlet for Gravity Falls content as closely as possible.
So, it's styled after Streets of Rage, which, as you heard me say in our Fight Fighters episode, really good game, one of my favorites. Basically, Streets of Rage, there's not much variation in the genre of beat-em-ups. The reason I say it's styled after Streets of Rage rather than other beat-em-ups is because after a while, you have you have a meter for health, and under that you have a meter for your special ability, and that's an attack that can clear everyone on the screen, which is lifted from Streets of Rage. That's not really a thing in... Actually, is it in the Simpsons game? I don't think it's in the Simpsons game.
No, I don't think so.
You can select to play as either Dipper or Mabel.
Dipper is a little bit faster, but a little bit weaker in health, I think, and attacks, and Mabel is the opposite. Dipper's special move is riding the multi-bear and blasting Disco Girl out of a stereo.
And Mabel's is riding Aoshima, the multi-headed dolphin.
Even their normal moves, we see like Mabel kind of six waddles on enemies. Dipper will bring out the Lammy dance. This game is chock full of references to the show, and it was something we hadn't seen before in a paratext, to use Abby's language.
I am embarrassingly bad at video games to the point where I would not be able to handle something made for children. So I partook in the ancient ritual of watching a Let's Play.
So if you're interested in a Let's Play of this game, we do have one up on our YouTube channel, which is just called Mystery Shack Look Back. Ella and I streamed it the night before this recording. And we will be doing more streams tying into metatextual aspects of Gravity Falls. So please follow my Twitch, twitch.tv/CAPN, GOATBEARD, Goatbeard Cap'n, Goatbeard Cap'n like Cap'n Crunch.
I love this game. It feels like so nostalgic in the sense that I looked at it and I was like, I expected this game to be made like 2 or 3 years ago, because it's just quite literally, chock full of all of these references and little gags that it feels like people looking back on it, but it was happening in the moment. And that just sort of blows my mind.
Right. It's like the people who made it were fans of the show too. And it reminds me of how I felt watching Gravity Falls for the first time. Like, this is a Disney Channel cartoon. This has no reason to be this good. And the same thing is like, this is a Flash game based on a Disney cartoon. This has no reason to be this good.
Yeah, and as a big Streets of Rage fan, the idea that this Flash game on the Disney Channel website is like a really faithful tribute to the series and genre, that doesn't make sense.
It helps that, at least for us, beat 'em ups are a very satisfying experience. You can kind of just turn your brain off and beat 'em up. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you are stimulated by all the like little rewards for having followed the show so closely. You're like, oh, there's Blenton Blandon, that's Sheriff Blubs, there's Old Man McGucket, like there's all these cameos and
there is, before you battle Rumble, there is a mid-boss of Leader R, the giant Manatar.
You actually get to go through the caves where the Manitars live and fight the Manitars, which is very satisfying for someone who's had to deal with toxic masculinity.
Yeah, so the levels are the forest, which is just like the general like woods area outside the Mystery Shack. The caves, which is the Manitars caves. The deep forest, which is like the mystical spot with the gnomes and the crystals.
Yeah, modeled after the Little Dipper forest. And then it's just the town itself.
Yeah, the city.
You guys are hitting on something really cool here, which is one of the reasons why video games make excellent paratexts. And this is coming out of Jonathan Gray's book, Show Sold Separately, which is entirely about these paratexts. And he writes that while video games don't allow their audiences complete freedom, they do at least allow players to dawdle in some spaces in which a film charges through. So these like are locations we get to see in the show, but some of them are like so absolutely minimal.
Yeah.
And we're barely in them. And then we get to this video game where like, while it's not advised, you absolutely can stop and look at things.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
That, for us as fans, meant the world. That this was the first time we actually got to look at Gravity Falls.
We actually got to live in Gravity Falls and explore it. It's not flawless. At the beginning of the city level, there is a line of dialogue.
Oh, a city level! Prepare to see the same background signs over and over.
No, but I get it. You could definitely, if you do stop and smell the, mushrooms.
You stop and smell the pixels, yeah.
Yeah, you do get a fun little, like in Final Fight Streets of Rage, all those beat-em-ups, you get a little flashing arrow telling you that you can go, and it's Grunkle Stan going like, go on, kids, beat more people up.
So this actually directly ties to why I was so into video games as a child, because Ella is from the suburbs, Abby is from the Midwest. I grew up in a really terrible town in New Jersey that was right next to New York City, and it kind of like the place where they put the worst parts of New York City are quarantined in this other city next to it in New Jersey. Orange is the name of it, by the way. And I was not permitted to play outside. I was not encouraged to play outside. If I had gone out without supervision, that was a really bad thing. At one point, our Dalmatian was just obsessed with the dirt in front of the house, and we're like, why? What's up? What's going on? Why are you... And we realized there was a bag of cocaine there. We had to call the cops, and so that was the environment I grew up in. So video games, as Abby had stated, are built on the idea of exploring locations, something I was not permitted to do, so it was the only place I could get this freedom.
Oh, there's so much more to video games, and like even just to Rumble's Revenge, and like one of the other things that you kind of touched on was the way that video games are a first-person experience, whereas watching TV is an incredibly passive activity. We watch and we absorb, and then once the episode is over, then we begin the process of interacting with it. But video games are interactive from start to finish, and you make the decisions on behalf of the character, but you also, in a sense, embody the space they inhabit within the story. So for these brief moments, and Gravity Falls would later, no spoilers, but create more opportunities for this to happen even more intensely, become a character within the scope of Gravity Falls, and you'd get to participate as Dipper or as Mabel. And I think for the first time, especially after such a long hiatus, that was one of the most deeply meaningful things that Disney ever gave to the fans without knowing how deeply meaningful it would be.
Yeah, I did take a class on game culture. I kind of am vibing on your level. Like, we talked about ludonarrative and stuff like that. That's kind of...
I always joke that a video game is a movie that stops and makes sure you're paying attention.
That's exactly what they did.
Like, you good? Can I keep going? Okay.
Yeah, and you get like this level of agency that you don't get when you're watching a show, because if you want to, you could just stand in one spot, and then that's the story.
Sure, it is a beat 'em up, so the goal is to punch enough people that you could keep walking right. Well, the reason we have talked so little about this game is it's a very short game.
It's a solid beat 'em up. It's got... I think we only noticed there's like a little bit of strategy involved in the final boss fight, right?
At the beginning of our playthrough, I directly said,
hey, look, the only way to fight anything in beat 'em ups, jump and then hit.
Yeah, it's the best way. You gotta jump up and then kick them.
Then that was used against me in the fight against Rumble at the end, because Rumble is very good at punching, and Mabel and Dipper are very short, so to actually hit him, you can't jump and attack. That he blocks that, but you can punch him in the shins.
You can break his kneecaps.
And I was not dealing any damage to him my first time fighting him because I kept jumping and attacking.
Okay, he blocks jumping attacks. That's why I'm not doing any damage. I've been paying... I've been paying so little attention. Yeah, because I'm shorter than him, so I can hit him in the knees, but I've been paying...
the power of being short.
But the strategy employed is you can interrupt his attacks by getting him to block by jumping and attacking, which is more strategy than is usually employed in beat 'em ups, which is fascinating for a Disney Channel flash game.
So I think the thing you said at the top of this, where there are 2 points about Rumble's Revenge, I think maybe it's actually 3. One is that it's a good game. 2 is what we were kind of just talking about what it represents as a paratext, and 3 is...
All right, let's get into it. Do we want to...
You want to travel into the hall?
So Abby, we actually... Landlord's rules, we can't talk about fan theories in this room.
Yeah, it's not up to building code to talk about fan theories in this room.
Gotcha.
There is one that has been sanctioned by the city council as safe to discuss fan theories. There is a hallway we have.
Yeah, there's some load-bearing fan theories in there, so...
So don't take those ones out.
Ladies and gentlemen, right this way to the Hall of Conspiracy!
Okay, we're very excited. I'm gonna be real with you all. The reason I agreed to do this podcast, to put all the work in, I'm the editor, by the way. I'm the one editing every episode.
Hi, future Charlie.
That sounds like it's not much work because it's a conversation and we already said these things. Oh, no. I'm curating beginning, middle, and end.
Mm-hmm.
I am listening and thinking like, oh, we shouldn't have talked about that. The Headhunters episode in the call is in a completely different order than you heard it.
Yep. But point being that the reason you even... was so excited about this.
The reason I wanted to pour all this work in was so we could get to the moment where we could reveal the cryptograms from Rumble's Revenge and the name of the Triangle Man. So...
For a little bit more context, these cryptograms pop up seemingly at random, which is why we think it was kind of a late addition, and we see it's just a picture of the image from the end of the theme song, except it's just the triangle guy, or the ACE, the ace, the all-seeing eye, Mr. Pyramid, what have you.
Or what we're about to learn is his canonical name.
Maybe it's Marvin.
So there are 12 of these that show up in the game, and some of them are numbered, so you know the order they're in. I don't know how you're supposed to know the order other than that, but there is a particular order, and we'll get to that in a second. But in order, it's...
I bet you're wondering who I am. I don't give up answers easy. I know things. Fascinating things. Your reality is a game to me, and I like games.
Oh, just like me.
Mischief is my middle name, but not my first. There are 6 hints I will give you. 1. There is a secret society in Gravity Falls. 2. The handyman knows more than you think. 3. Gideon has been searching for something. 4. What goes up is sure to come down. 5. Dipper is playing with fire. 6. I will be returning to Gravity Falls.
Now, he says that Mischief is my middle name, but not my first, but doesn't go on to say his first name. All of these cryptograms have a randomly capitalized letter, which, Ella, were it me who was translating these, wouldn't have thought about that.
You would, interesting. You would have just whatever.
Yeah,
corrected
yeah.
it maybe, typo.
Right now, I write in all caps. I think it's just more legible if there's a uniformity to how letters look. And so if I were writing these on paper, it would have been in all caps. If I were typing them, I might not bother with the shift or caps lock key.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I would have figured this out, but...
You also would have to put them in the right order because they do appear at random. It helps that some of them are numbered.
Yeah, so the last 6 of them are numbered, which gives you a hint, and gives you basically information you need to know. Because once you've decoded them, the decoded capitalized letter, not the one in the code, the decoded capitalized letters are in order MY, NAME, IS, BILL. And Abby, what does that spell?
My name is Bill.
My name is Bill.
Fascinating.
And it's pretty clear it's referring to the triangle guy. 1, given Alex's tweet in November. 2, the fact that all of the other symbols are removed from when the cryptogram comes up, so you're only looking at the triangle guy.
Mm-hmm.
So now, thanks to a flash game that no one rewatching the show or tackling it the first time would think to stop and play, we know the name of a symbol that has appeared in every episode, and I guess has a perspective, has a point of view, has almost a personality in those codes. I guess is confirmed to be a character.
I think even though that is the culmination, there are also 12 cryptograms, 12 little hints to nibble on during this time as well, which is huge.
We have just a little bit more for the Hall of Conspiracies here.
You know, obviously there was much speculation that was sparked by these codes, but also the phenomenon I referred to as kind of with my yogurt analogy, we've also called it hiatus brain, and Abby definitely has a lot of research to that effect.
Amid the Wild Minds submitted this to Gravity Falls Conspiracies, who then published it on December 16th, 2012. The 3 men. I'm not quite sure if someone has already come up with a similar theory, but this is what I think. There was a group of 3 men, Grunkle Stan being one of them, who were in charge of researching the strange happenings in Gravity Falls. Grunkle Stan was in charge of monsters, Book 3. Another was in charge of artifacts, Book 2. And the first was in charge of something else, maybe locations or incantations, Book 1. After a while, the first man became evil and corrupted and wanted to use the book's knowledge to gain power. In order to keep the peace and not let the books get in the first man's hands, the 2 other men hid the books and created the machine Dipper found in the tree. We know the machine had 2 switches, but the only one that worked was the switch that revealed book number 3. We also know that one of the wires in the machine was cut. The broken switch was probably what revealed book number 2, and the wire might have been cut by Gideon, or whoever found that book, I'm guessing Gideon got a hold of the book from somewhere else. Thinking back to the three men and the books, I also think that if book 1 was about magical locations, it might have something about a specific place where if you bring together the right artifact and utter an incantation, you will turn into a powerful monster. This is probably why the first man wants the other books so badly, because he needs to learn more about the magical artifact and the monster to complete the ritual.
So I definitely think we weren't seeing theories this elaborate as often as we are during this giant 4-month hiatus. It's like we've been saying, with nothing better to do than to rewatch the first 12 episodes over and over, the theories get simultaneously like super grand, but also very, very specific and granular, where you are, and basically analyzing it frame by frame and thinking about what ties into what. Because even in that last theory, we're talking about the machine that was on for like a second that Dipper flipped a switch and it revealed the book, to focus in on that specifically.
To rewatch the episodes that much in 2012, you would have had to have purchased them on Amazon Prime, so I bet Jeff Bezos is really happy about this hiatus. Abby, do you want to read the second theory we have here?
Yeah.
This theory was submitted on January 14th, 2013 to gravityfallsconspiracies.tumblr.com. Take it.
Dipper's full name. I have a theory as to what Dipper's real name might be. In the arcade game episode, Dipper wins and writes his 3 initials as Dip. One would assume this is short for Dipper, but I believe they are really his true initials, D-I-P. The D and the I are for his first and middle, and the P obviously stands for Pines. His nickname was inspired by his birthmark, but reinforced by his acronymic full name.
And I love that because not only does that require them to pick out and analyze the moment where he writes his initials in the game, but that you also need to remember the moment in Double Dipper where they establish that Dipper is not his real name.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. That he is. There's only been one episode mentioning that is not his real name. Oh, my gosh. Because it's like there's so many things I just take for granted as part of the lore that everyone knows.
Yeah, and that's part of my motivation for doing this whole podcast is like that it's easy to lose that hindsight and remember what it was like.
To assume that we always knew Bill's name, or because I had watched Double Dipper maybe 2 or 3 times up until this point in my life, maybe 4. I have been witnessed or been involved in discussions of Dipper's real name maybe 100 times.
Yeah, and it's just, this whole thing is just our less crotchety way of saying, in my day, we walked uphill through the snow both ways to get our Gravity Falls, and we liked it.
We liked it. You youngins just clicking the next button on Disney+.
Yeah, you Zoomers. We have a theory from January 11th, 2013 on Gravity Falls Conspiracies titled, A Pink Cell Phone? Okay, so you know the scene in the second episode in Legend of the Gobblewonker with the photoshopped Slender Man? We didn't talk about that, but there was a screenshot of a moment from Legend of the Gobblewonker. Someone photoshopped Slender Man and passed it around as though Slender Man was really in it. He was not, but they were just referring to that moment. I'm not sure if anyone noticed, because I haven't really seen anyone talk about it, but in the scene behind a chopped tree, there's a random pink phone there. I've looked a couple of times, and it looks like Candy's phone from Summerween, the 12th episode. I actually have a theory that it might be tied in with some big episode or plot twist or something. What do you think? And there's people reblogging with like, I'm pretty sure that's just a mushroom, but it's that same discussion of like, does this matter? Where before you would have been like, no, that's nothing. And now you have people who are like, this means something, I swear it does. And I also love, again, like specifying like, in episode 2, like, I love that very fandom way of speaking where it's like, oh yes, well, in episode 2, and this ties over to the thing in episode 12, and...
You guys are also, like, again, pointing towards a piece of fandom studies. There is a chapter in the book Fans, Bloggers, and Gamers by Henry Jenkins, who's like the most famous of the fan studies scholars, called Do You Enjoy Making the Rest of Us Feel Stupid? It is about the first time that like fans kind of truly had access to the internet in relationship to Twin Peaks, and that they were doing this exact thing by like freezing their screen and like playing things like backwards all the time with their VHS tapes, and then like taking a picture of that with their phone, and then like not with their phone. Oh my gosh,
With their Polaroid camera.
with their Polaroid cameras, and like having to scan those in, and they created like their own version of Reddit, which was just for trying to figure out what was going on with Twin Peaks.
What's amazing about that is VHSs can rewind, which does in fact play the audio backwards very, very quickly. So to even attempt to discern anything from that would require multiple attempts, multiple listens, which is horrible for the tape.
And it's incredibly fitting that Twin Peaks is one of the first examples of internet analysis of television, because obviously we've talked about how the influence of Twin Peaks on Gravity Falls.
And then also Gravity Falls was largely influenced by, speaking of hiatuses, The Summer Between Who Shot Mr. Burns, Part 1 and Part 2.
Correct.
It's mostly based off of Who Shot JR from Dallas, but realizing that they were creating a Twin Peaks-like phenomenon by making people have to wait to get the answer, episode 2 opens with a parody of Twin Peaks. So here's something we didn't talk about in episode 1 because we hadn't done the math. But we know that Alex never missed an episode of The Simpsons because he mentions it on the first episode of Everything's Coming Up Simpsons. Fantastic podcast. We know what summers he spent with Granty Lois because he has said it in interviews. What I pieced together since we recorded episode 1, the summer between Who Shot Mr. Burns, Part 1 and 2, was the first summer with Granty Lois.
Oh my god, amazing.
When Alex was wondering who shot Mr. Burns, he was in a cabin in the Pacific Northwest, forced to spend time with his older relative who he didn't really know.
I mean, it all goes to show that fans are incredibly dedicated, and it is also a testament to this thing we call participatory culture, which is that there are no barriers to being involved in the creation of a culture, in the creation of sort of the history of something that matters to you, and that you can be mentored by someone. You are part of the conversation. You feel like you are wanted there. And fandom is really good at that. And in a way, partly because fans are just sort of willing to work together and willing to do ridiculous things, like look at their paused VHS with all of the jumpy lines and like try to stare into the background of an episode of Twin Peaks. And that's incredible, the things that fans will do. It like all goes to show that stories are in a way ingrained in our DNA, and sharing those stories is just vital to our existence as people.
Exactly. This is just the modern equivalent of an oral tradition.
This is the modern equivalent of painting on cave walls and then just having everybody like clap and go, yeah, good job, Grog.
Abby, you are amazing.
You're like so great.
Aw, shucks.
Do you enjoy making us all feel stupid, Abby?
I, for one, very much enjoyed feeling stupid today. But I also felt really smart in a way, because I knew that, like...
You are smart. By participating within these cultures, you might not be aware of it, but you are actively creating culture in the moment and actively contributing to your community, which involves a lot of hard work and intelligence and dedication. So kudos to both of you for making this podcast and doing the work you do. But also people like the students I teach, I will definitely have them listen to this podcast to get a sense of what it is like to be a part of a fandom.
Aww.
Oh no, I said the word porn in this episode.
Oh no.
Abby, what is a fanzine?
A fanzine is a collection of art and writing, and in the olden days of like the 60s, back when people were riding dinosaurs to work, a fanzine was also a review of episodes. It was sort of like the internet before the internet, and now they serve quite literally as...
This is why this is the worst episode of Star Trek ever.
And now they quite literally serve as just these pieces of history and memory, and also as a function of charity, that because... obviously, selling things like fan fiction for money is a little bit iffy. Legally, when you sell things, you then turn it into a profit for a charity, making everything good and legal, and also really emphasizing the impact that fandom can have on the greater world.
And what is 10 Years Later?
Gravity Falls 10 Years Later is a fanzine that I am running. It will be released for pre-orders in the spring of 2022. So Gravity Falls 10 Years Later is a look back on these characters and re-inviting them into our lives for their 10th anniversary on screen. So in this upcoming summer, Gravity Falls will turn 10. And these contributors and myself, the other moderators, are all really looking forward to having an opportunity to reflect on why Gravity Falls mattered to us and sort of bring it back into the light for a moment and celebrate all that it has done for us and all that we hope to do for it.
It's actually a fantastic companion piece to this podcast.
And we'll give that another shout out when that is released, because Abby, I don't think you've put together the math yet. But how many episodes are there of Gravity Falls?
Okay, well, technically speaking, there are 40 solid episodes, but sometimes that final episode does get split up into 2, so there might technically be 41.
There are 52 weeks in a year. We are doing 40 episodes plus intertextual material, so roughly 52 episodes. The first episode of our podcast was released on June 16th, 2021. So, Abby, when will the final episode of our podcast be released?
Oh, gosh. Depending on how many episodes you make, which will be well over 40, you could easily make it to the next June 15th.
This podcast will end on June 15th, 2022, the exact 10-year anniversary of Gravity Falls Season 1, Episode 1, Tourist Trapped, preview premiere, following the Disney Channel original
movie Let It Shine. That's what we're really getting at, is that we're big Let It Shiners.
Oh.
We don't know what it is.
But anyway, thank you for... Did you want to talk about, are you allowed to talk about your paper, or is that not a thing that you wanted to...
Yeah, I'm doing a little bit of academic writing at this point. I am a recent graduate with my master's degree, and now I'm in like this sort of baby phase where I gotta start like plugging and chugging out papers and presenting at conferences and all that stuff. But yeah, just trying to do a lot of the work for Gravity Falls that I spent all of these years in school kind of preparing myself for. And some of it I can't speak on because there will be spoilers ahead, but I am spending a lot of time looking at Gravity Falls as a text that not only changed what it means to be a show on television and how these sort of paratextual odds and ends have come together to create what is truly a participatory experiences for audiences, and was not only a way for them to feel like their efforts in Gravity Falls mattered and like they could be a part of the show, but was also a way for Alex Hirsch and his team to just over and over again extend their deepest gratitude and their deepest affection for their audiences by allowing them this opportunity to be so involved. I will extend myself and say that I am a writer for a blog called The Daily Fandom, and as we speak, I am working on an article about how Gravity Falls protected the art of audience participation that you can look forward to within the next, I would say, about 2 weeks.
We're definitely going to promote that. Let us know when that is out. And Abby, thank you so much for being here. This was like one of the most like fun times I've ever had talking about Gravity Falls.
It was almost like the teacher brought in Bill
Nye the Science Guy, and the whole class got lit. Somehow it actually was better than that, though, which I didn't think was possible. And I just really appreciate you and fan studies and you like bringing this into the light of this podcast of like something that is so often like viewed cynically, making it really like genuine and understanding that, like, yeah, like, that's legit stuff that is worth studying and talking about as a part of our world.
It's legit. Fan studies is so legit, and being a fan is the most legit thing you can do. It was awesome to talk to you guys. I just sit around all day, like in a closet, waiting for someone to pull me out and be like, time to talk about Gravity Falls. And I'm like, okay.
Well, you're going back in.
Yeah, now I have to go back in my dark closet, but it's okay.
Your dark academia closet.
My dark academia closet.
I was specifically requested by friend of the show, Mary McKeon, to ask you about dark academia. So there you go, Mary. Yes, so Abby is willing and available to help us, but and obviously this is a very different episode than you're used to. So we have a Discord server that is linked in the description. We have a Twitter. If there's like a specific time where you're like, ooh, this feels like an Abby one, fellas, don't call us fellas, but yeah, like feel free to specifically request her presence. I mean, we're not against having her help whenever. If you want to find more episodes of this podcast, you can go to our host network, pipedreampodcasts.com, where you can find other shows like How Did This Not Get Made, Escape from Walt Disney, and Come On Fahuquapods. Come On Fahuquapods is also really good at talking about the text and the intertext, and if you like what you heard here today, I would highly recommend that one. And also on Pipe Dream would probably be the easiest place to find the link to our social medias or Discord server.
Yep.
Or you can contact us at mysteryshacklookback@gmail.com.
Thank you to Brian for making the instrumental for our theme song and for voicing Stan in the Hall of Conspiracies intro. Thanks to Sim and the Dim Bulb V2-0 for making the instrumental to the Hall of Conspiracies intro, as well as the chiptune version of our theme song.
And thanks to Mike, aka Scum, from twitch.tv/scum_and_villainy for voicing the cryptograms. And thanks to Jordan Kolb for additional audio cleanup on this episode.
Thank you to Abby Kirby for coming by today to talk about Gravity Falls and how it relates to your studies. That is absolutely fantastic that you do that, and it is absolutely fantastic that you teach a whole class that incorporates Gravity Falls. That is like one of the coolest things I've ever heard. I think you're one of the coolest people I know.
It feels rude that I don't have an apple to put on your desk. Yeah, you're amazing, and literally reach out whenever. We consider ourselves your new friends and not your coworkers. Don't give that laugh to that. Come on.
You're my friends now too.
And Ella.
We got the awkward ending. Ding, ding, ding. All right. Yes.
Awkward ending. Play us out.
I feel like I'm just gonna do that. See, I just made it more awkward. You see how I did that?
Oh, I didn't see. Can you explain it to me?
Well, you see, we kind of took an ending that was already kind of, a little fumbly.
Okay, yeah.
And then I just kind of intensified that, kind of took the dial.
Yeah, okay.
And then just kind of,
All right.
Music! Take me back to the place I know with the mystery shack and the forest gnomes. I'm already packed, so come on, let's go. Don't get me started. My heart's in Gravity Falls.
Ooh, pretty colors! Reminds me of my favorite sweaters.
Where are we? We were in the arcade playing a creepy Gravity Falls game, and then Flashpoint! We are here! Wherever here
Yeah,
is.
we can't use Flash anymore, Dipper.
Yeah, so this is running via Flashpoint.